I'm going to open up for questions for a few others now. I had a question for David Jacques. Uh, just kind of an interesting presentation, but kind of, what are the policy implications you draw out of that the analysis that you've done?
Honestly, I haven't thought through the policy implications. The biggest part of this work was just getting it going again and getting the numbers together and updated. So this is going to get updated every year when the data comes out. Update is easy. So in the next year, when I go through this again, it's going to be looking at the policy implications of, what does this mean, and also why are some of these things happening. So yeah, that's where I'm at with the work.
A question for Marcy. I'm just the question on the data on the Pearson hub shows that the Peel region is an enormous freight hub in the corridor. How prominent is Peel in the planning process that you're following, and any specific thoughts on the role of Hamilton Niagara in the corridor?
How did you say how prone is Peel, or
how prominent are they in the planning process?
Oh, well, I mean, I think Peel are leaders on local logistics planning, for sure, as many in this network know. But I think the challenge is that the airport, the Toronto Pearson Airport hub really crosses more than just Peel. It's more than just Peel. Crosses into Vaughan. It crosses into the city of Toronto. There's many jurisdictions, and that area in particular, with both vehicles and or logistic vehicles and passengers, I think it could use its own kind of district plan to really understand how best to approach some of the logistic challenges and the congestion challenges that are there. In terms of Hamilton and Niagara, I mean, we're just starting down this road of collecting this regional information, and part of, as I mentioned, on the kind of research innovation ecosystem side, Hamilton figures prominently in that, and then of course with the port being there, on the logistics side, we haven't really had a chance to go deep into sort of the interactions between the different employment areas that are related to logistics and transportation, but certainly I think that MTO, Minister of Transportation, is looking at all modes as part of their multimodal plan, and so we hope to kind of have kind of a feedback loop between what they're doing and what we're doing.
Nice. Maybe I'll ask a question for the two Davids as well. I know it's kind of the one presentation or point in the presentation from David is just kind of the magnitude of the cost to logistics seems fairly high. I just kind of wonder just how urgent of a problem is this? Is it one that persists kind of post-COVID now that there's been a kind of a change in kind of traffic volumes and patterns and the like, and is there anything that we can do about it? So either David.
Okay, well, I'll start, other David, and I think one of the biggest things that I see changing, and if you look at what drives up the price, is typically how urgent things are required. So if you were to look at what's happened over the last few years, the rise of e-commerce, and I do work with a lot of e-commerce shippers, and they do track how their sales are tied to how fast people and the consumers can get the product. And I know that sounds crazy, meaning maybe I'll buy that patio set, but if I can't get it by Thursday, I don't want it anymore. But that seems to have been the trend in the last few years. And obviously that demand for speed does drive up the price. I don't know if that's going to continue, meaning people might be less willing to pay a premium to have stuff shipped quicker, or perhaps not care as much about speed and look more at cost and other factors, but that definitely has been a trend. And again, they are cyclical, but I see that underlying trend of e-commerce and the need for speed as something that's driven up the price in the last couple of years.
Great. So I'm curious too, I'm trying to read tea leaves a bit, but I think we all are. Since the COVID lockdown, Canada seems to be emerging out of it faster than the U.S. U.S. actually seems to be going back into a dip. The USMCA, CUSMA, NAFTA 2.0 has just been ratified, or it just comes into effect now. There's all kinds of concern about kind of geopolitics with China, and there seems to be a renewed interest in local supply chains, particularly in things like critical medical gear. Just wondering kind of where you see things shaking out now that it seemed to be off of the trend line we were.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of touched on the onshoring and nearshoring, and we are seeing that. I mean, we're seeing the trend. It's been very slow, and obviously it requires a lot of infrastructure. And in addition to the rail center in Milton, I mean, you see the growth of the warehousing space there. That's a huge requirement. But it definitely is something, and again, driven likely too by lower interest rates, which will help carrying costs. But for other reasons, like you mentioned, more control, more quality control, closer to end customer, less reliance on, foreign intervention. There is going to be a move, I think, to bring more product manufactured closer to where the consumers are using them. So that will likely increase the need for what's called local drayage, like just more multimodal, moving rail cars and ocean containers on chassis versus traditional, trucking, vans, as I'd call them. And I think that length of haul will definitely shrink. And I think there's likely more and more home delivery services that are going to pop up that help connect distribution centers to consumers close to where they are.
Okay, thanks. David, Jacques, I just wondering what if you see anything as it means kind of coming out of, particularly kind of reference to the study that you've done for and the lessons for our kind of our logistics competitiveness in this, and kind of knowing that there's been a disruption.
Yeah, well, I mean, I expect that we'll see something similar to the last recession. So those big dips and all those plots will show up again. But sort of related to what you were asking earlier about, competitiveness or the cost of logistics is, I'm always hesitant to say it's good for logistics costs to go down or go up, because a lot of it comes from the revenues of the transportation sector. So when the logistics costs are going down, the transportation sector is generating less revenue. If you're in that industry, not so good. But from the perspective of the country as a whole, you'd want that cost of moving things around to be lower. So I guess it depends where you're sitting.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just going through lists of questions here. So for David Short, what are Challenger's biggest strategic concerns over the next decade? And maybe Marcy, if you have any insights as well to kind of the competitiveness generally.
I'm unmuted. Well, I mean, I think that it's been noted that we are the fastest growing region in North America. So planning, this issue that I raised with mitigating the challenges between the conflicts of residential uses and employment uses, and particularly, our ability to have the capacity for storage and that sort of thing, and reduce congestion. I think that it will be our biggest challenge. We have the fortunate problem of growth post-COVID, hopefully, I don't really see any change, any change in the trajectory of our growth as we, when we come out of the recession. Canada's, been receiving in this area anyway. We've been receiving, 100,000 to 125,000 people per year in our growth rates, and that likely will that trajectory will still stay the same once we are, open. All economy is open up. So I really do think that that's the biggest challenge, and that we really need, less reactive and more proactive planning as it relates to planning for logistics and the growth in our region.
Yeah, and from our perspective, from Challenger, I mean, again, having both logistics capabilities and our own assets, and sort of going off of David's comments, over the last 20 years, I would say Challenger's margin probably hasn't changed. Transportation margin for companies is typically very low, like less than 3%. Obviously, with a lot of assets, you've got a lot of capital costs, you've got a lot of insurance costs and transportation, and the cost to attract drivers is quite substantial. I think one of the things we're seeing is the emergence of non-asset-based competitors that, with some decent technology, can represent themselves beyond their assets to a degree where you could see how when many people are fighting for the same freight and demanding the use of a smaller pool of assets, the rates could go up. So meaning, I think a lot of those ratios I showed weren't necessarily true, this many trucks and this many shipments. It was this many people representing that they had this many trucks, which typically inflates the demand to what the true supply. And I think just the emergence of people who don't need any trucks can literally be in their basement and be a load broker. Again, if they're providing valued services, is great, but I think in a lot of ways is driving up some prices unnecessarily in certain areas and not giving enough credit to the people who have to incur all the costs of insurance, drivers, and the capital.
Great. Kind of question about about public policy and land use planning, and maybe this is for anybody. The people doing land use and transportation planning look at the data they've got and kind of try to forecast long-term trends, and then we've just disrupted that trend. And it looks like in a lot of ways the sense of urgency may have gone away. I'm just wondering what kind of how you engage and how you discuss or how you talk about or is there still that sense of urgency, and if not, how do you kind of approach government about addressing it?
Maybe I'll speak to that point a little bit. But so, I mean, in this region, we have what's called and there's a new name for it, a place to grow. So it is really a land use plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And it's really been mostly about policies that relate to residential growth. There are certainly policies that are related to employment planning, of which logistics is one. We use very crude tools, I would suggest, in terms of number of jobs for forecasting, in terms of there's not a very sophisticated modeling exercise as it relates to the amount of land that different sectors need. And so therefore you are on a trajectory as you update those forecasts to plan longer term, that it becomes, it's almost like path dependent. It becomes harder for folks who are implementing the plan to be flexible to make any changes according to new data that's out there. And it's so I see it as a bit of a system problem that we need to be able to build more flexibility into our land use planning. But at the same time, we need better information, and we need that information to be shared across multiple ministries who are dealing both the transportation side of things, the economic development side of things, and the land use planning side of things. And then that information really needs to be shared with the municipal partners who are implementing these provincial plans, because they certainly do not have the capacity to be able to collect this on an ongoing basis. As I said, Peel is an outlier, I think, in really planning strategically and longer term on the logistics side of things. But there are a lot of areas in the Greater Golden Horseshoe that have less sophistication around that side.
Great. Maybe kind of, I had said I was going to try to wrap up after an hour and 15. I'm kind of at about there. I did have a couple of questions though that kind of came through asking about access to transit and airports. I guess in Hamilton, it's a particular issue. It's outside of the city. In Toronto, it's another kettle of fish entirely. Just wondering if anybody had any comments about both transit and maybe the shipment of goods to and out of the particularly Hamilton Airport. I guess in our own region is an issue with Highway 6 and getting off of Highway 6 and the time it takes to get a truck to where it needs to go from the airport. Anybody have any comments?
Hi, Ken. It's Dina here from Hamilton Airport.
Yep.
Thanks for the question. We're definitely pro enhancements on Highway 6 to continue broadening access between the airport and the key transportation corridors of the 403 and onward. You know, when we talk to our key cargo partners, we know that the current single lane operation is not ideal. It's in a rural area and really does justify an expansion to a second lane. Similarly, lighting on Highway 6 continues to come up in various conversations in terms of a lot of the movement of goods is happening in the nighttime hours or early hours of the day when daylight is not on your side. So these are things that we continue to advocate for. I'm happy that you posed the question. We're trying at different levels of government to make that point known. I see Jerry's on the call with us from Pathway Group as well, and definitely helps us relay the same message. And so, yeah, I would say Highway 6 is probably the key priority for us because it's an immediate artery to and from YHM. And then, of course, there's some constraints as well in terms of the 403 as you're coming away from the airport, and just some lane constraints there where you have sometimes just a double lane operation and traffic periods of the day where there could be a need for a third lane.
Great. So maybe I kind of wrap it up after this. I know we said we'd try to get us out kind of in an hour and 15, and we're just a little over that now. If there are questions, people have ideas and things that kind of on drives home or walks to the kitchen from home. We're taking questions if you need to, and we'll endeavor to get answers to anything you have to ask. And maybe I kind of pass it over to Saida just if she's still on, just to bridge us to the next call in the series.
Thank you so much, Ken, and thanks everyone for your wonderful presentation. Didn't I tell you we have an excellent array of presenters? And I'm really thrilled to see all the discussions, and thanks Dina for jumping in. This was fantastic. This is the type of dialogue that we were hoping to get more encouraged and foster, and this is happening, and this is great. So considering the time is short, I just wanted to thanks everyone who joined and those who helped us to make this event happen. Next event is going to be on July 29th. We will send detailed information about the speakers and details, and we're hoping to see you all there and continue this conversation until our roundtable discussion at the end. The dates of the last two events are not yet set, but we're expecting they will be almost 3 weeks apart from each other. So, again, thanks again, and have a wonderful rest of the day.